I don't say anything that I don't want to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't answer a question I don't want to answer.
What does it mean to be in love, right? Oh my God. Yeah, that's a great question. Lesson 4, interview skills. Playing by your rules.
Let's talk about interviewing. Your first priority when interviewing should always be keeping yourself and your loved ones safe. With that in mind, don't forget you're off the tables. Remember the boundaries that you've established and your stated intention for being on the show in the first place. The show may test your boundaries. Be prepared for that. And remember that you can hold your ground. You'll likely be asked the same questions over and over and over. There are 2 different kinds of interviews: OTFs, also known as on the flies, and pickups. OTFs happen immediately after an event has taken place while on set. Usually, they'll take 15 to 30 minutes and cover what just happened. Whereas pickups can take about a little bit longer, like 2 to 4 hours, to film and cover days or weeks of previous events and cover the larger arc of your experience.
There are 2 general rules of reality TV interviews that the production company will expect you to always follow. Rule number 1. Depending on the type of interview, you'll be expected to use a specific tense as you're talking about an experience. In OTFs, you'll use past tense to talk about what just happened, and in pickups, you'll have to speak in the present tense, as if you're giving voice to your personal internal monologue in the moment. Rule number 2, you must never place the event in a specific time. You can't say, "It was February," or "It's 2023. I mean, has he learned nothing?" That would not be acceptable. In both interview contexts, it's important to remember that you do have some wiggle room. After receiving a question, you can take as much time as you need to consider your answer before you start to speak. Silence doesn't make good TV, so they're not going to show you sitting there as you figure out what you're going to say. If you're talking about something that makes you uncomfortable, remember that you can point right back to the cameras and the production. It will make it less likely that they'll want to include this particular response. Also remember that you have autonomy and you can ask up front, "Hey, producer, do I have to answer this question?" Also, you can always be playful. If a question is silly or intrusive or ridiculous, you can laugh about it. You can point to how crazy it is that we're talking about these things. We'll talk more about playfulness later, but remember that it's always great to have a sense of joy.
How did you keep yourself safe and feel in control in the interview process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so something to be wary of and to remain aware of in advance, right, is this thing called frankenbits, right? So over the course of an interview, it's very rare that, as you see in this case, you'll see the person being interviewed continuously, right? So you won't see someone for longer than 5 seconds looking at the camera or looking at the producer and saying, you know, "Here's my experience," right? Instead, it will be kind of cut with the moment or the experience that we are talking about. And as it's being interspersed with that experience, the production can take liberties and take an interview and on the fly from this day, and they could take a pickup from this day, right? And they can put them all together to make something up that you never said, right? You know, Miles, I've been having a great time like shooting this with you, and I just want to let you know I love you.
I appreciate that, man. You know, I hate when you're like gross.
So keeping that in mind, I had a few tricks up my sleeve that I felt would make it harder for them to kind of create these frankenbits and throw all these things together to make things I wouldn't say. One thing that I did very frequently and that I think was really helpful was I made sure that there were like very dramatic modulations in my voice, right? So that it became harder to like splice together sentences that would just have different modulations. So all the time, I'd just kind of go up and down and talk in these very expressive ways that made it so that it was really harder for the production to actually piece together the sentences, right? Sometimes I would make sure to end the sentence in a particular way, you know? And right now, this is a little hyperbolic. This isn't, you know, it's a dramatic what I'm doing because I wouldn't want to draw attention to that, but the last thing that you want to do, you'll make it as easy as possible for them if you're talking like this, right? If you're just kind of talking in a very simple, almost monotone fashion, it'll be really easy for them to piece together different interviews with each other to make it seem as if you said something that you never said. Another thing that's really helpful, that's a really simple, sly trick, is using the conditional tense as much as possible, right? So that, obviously they have their rules of using the past tense or of using the present tense. But kind of using the hypothetical or the conditional falls somewhere in between and does apply to both, but it's not grounded in reality. So if you more frequently say, well, if I were to do this, or if I were to feel this way, I suppose I would behave in such a fashion, right? So trying as frequently as possible to use the conditional to make sure you're implying like, this isn't necessarily the truth, right? If they're forcing you to answer a question, right? So if they're forcing you to say like, do you think you'll fall in love with this person, right? You can say, and if you're trying to say like, do I have to answer this? If they're like insisting you answer the question, an easy exit route that will fly under the radar is if you say, well, if we were to get to know each other very deeply, if we were to establish a mutual sense of respect and adoration for each other, then I could potentially imagine the two of us falling in love with one another, right? Just making sure throughout you're using those conditionals.
Oh, thank you for sharing what you did. It's not my style I can't think like that. Like I can't do the up and down of my voice. My voice sounds like this all the time. If I'm excited, I might talk a little bit louder, but like I have to be like, it probably is very easy to chop up what I say and use different parts and plug them into different things.
Mm-hmm.
What I did to keep myself safe or what I continue to do to keep myself safe is I don't say anything that I don't want to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't answer a question I don't want to answer. If there's a question that I don't want to answer, I pause, think if I really want to answer the question, then ask the producer, like, do I have to answer that question? Or can you ask that question a different way? Mm-hmm. So that I'm not answering anything that makes me feel compromised or that could be used against me. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, if it's a yes or no question, I'm giving you yes or no. You know, like I'm not going to give you anything that I don't want. I don't think people are trying to be malicious or like trying to put me in a bad place. I didn't feel harmed in any way in my experience. However, if you're getting asked on like day 2, like, are you in love with this person? I'm gonna look at you like, do you think I'm in love with this person? You know, like I'm not gonna answer that question. So I think the more intentional that you are about it, or just clear you are on what you want and what you're not gonna answer, that also can be beneficial.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you, and I'm sure, you know, everybody else would love to hear you kind of take us through what happens in an interview.
Yeah. So like step by step. Well, first you get mic'd up. Right? I don't think people understand like there's a lot of just like logistics that happens behind. So you'll have a mic on you at some point. They'll either tape it to your clothes, tape it to your body. Typically, we don't look like directly into the camera like this when we're doing an interview. We're typically looking at a producer who's like sitting right there and is asking, or next to the camera, who we're talking to, who's asking us questions. They typically ask questions very quickly, or like right behind each other, and you're expected to restate the question when in your answer. And so they'll ask you, Miles, how are you feeling today? And I'll say in response, today I'm feeling tired. and I'm looking at the person while I'm answering it because that's what I expected of me. If I ever like didn't want to answer a question sometimes and was like over it, because sometimes, man, those days are long. I'm not gonna lie to you. Those filming days can be really, really long. You're really tiring. You're asking me a question I don't want to answer. I'm hungry, etc. I'm gonna look at the camera, and they know that I'm not supposed to do that, and we'll be like, okay, Miles is tired. He doesn't want to do this anymore. Like, let's cut it, right? Or and never feel wrong asking the producer, hey, what questions are you going to be asking me? How many questions are you going to be asking me? Just so you can prepare yourself. The more that you know, the better you'll feel when you do it.
Yeah, and I think also like the key thing to always remember is that it will be extremely repetitive.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna want to like focus on a specific narrative, right? Or they're gonna want to like kind of frame you in a specific way that you may have an inkling on, but you may not know for sure what that is, right? And so they're going to ask you the same question or questions over and over and over and over and over in slightly different ways with the hopes that you will like slip up or give them just some like, you'll imply something in a specific way that you don't mean to imply it, right? So prepare yourself to be answering the same question or series of questions over and over and over and over. And if you aren't giving them anything, right? So if you answer a yes or no question with just a yes, they'll probably push you a little bit. They'll probably say like, can you go more deeply into that? Can you tell us a bit more about that? So prepare yourself to either find ways to say like, hey, I'm not prepared to answer that question, or that's a ridiculous question, or to just, kind of play with them. You'll make them feel really good. This is a little manipulative. But hey, we're also being manipulated through this whole process, right? You'll make your producer feel really good if when they ask you a question and you need time to think about it, you act like it's cutting right to the core and it's a really fascinating, profound, deep question. If they ask you like, what does it mean to be in love, right? Oh my God. That's a great question. And that gives you time to consider how you want to answer. It gives you time to like strategize in the moment. And it also makes the production company feel like you're giving them everything you've got.
Another important part of this experience is fill in the blank responses. They're going to give you prompts that are typically going to be the same question, maybe tweaked in couple different ways, but grounded in like, what is your why? I chose to be on the show because, and giving a very consistent response. And if it changes, making sure that that's very like stated and that your producer knows that, so they can ask you the questions to help you be able to reshape your narrative or be able to reclaim like how you're feeling in this moment, and be able to put it in a place and time in the timeline. I think that very often things can be like put in different places, but like knowing that since it's a journey, I think it also elevates the story to know that maybe you shifted at a certain point and like what helped that. And I think being able to communicate that as much as you can with the producers makes it a much more meaningful experience for you.
Yeah.
Now that we've stated what the rules are or the things that you can expect in an interview, now I'm going to ask a couple of questions as if you're in a live interview. Pause them after each question and act like you're in an interview with me. Why are you taking this class? Are you experiencing any regrets or doubts about taking this class? What part of this class are you most looking forward to? Fill in the blank. I enrolled in this class because...
Great. Now that we've practiced interviewing, it's time for us to take the next step in the learning process. So far, we've talked a lot about what it's like to be an individual in relation to the production company. But the reality is that we're sharing the screen and this experience with other people, many of whom we've never met before. So in order to take care of yourself and the people around you who you'll come to care about and know deeply, it's important to learn how we navigate interpersonal relationships. So the next lesson is all about balancing interpersonal relationships and considering those as we're also navigating the production.